So here I am, on a subreddit where I never thought I'd be sharing this kind of story. I'm just a regular guy, living a pretty average life with my wife, Julia, of 8 years. We've had our ups and downs, sure, who doesn't? But nothing that ever made me think she'd betray me. We got a decent marriage. No kids, just the two of us and our dog, Max. Lately, though, things haven't felt quite right. It started small, Julia being more distant, less affectionate, always on her phone, and suddenly working late more often. At first, I brushed it off. She's busy at work, maybe a new project or some responsibilities piling up. But then it started to get to me. I started noticing little things. Her always being on her phone, being more defensive when I asked her simple questions like, "How was your day?" Or "Who are you texting?" And the constant, "I'm so tired. I just need some space" routine, even when we hadn't had much time together in weeks. It all started to feel off. I'm not some paranoid guy, but I'm also not an idiot. I've always been a bit of a laid-back, live and let live kind of person. But after a while, these changes didn't feel normal. I guess the intuition kicked in, and something in me knew I was on the verge of discovering something I didn't want to. And then it happened. The moment everything changed. It was a Saturday morning. Julia had stayed out late the night before with her friends, something she started doing more often recently. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. She deserved time with her friends, right? But when she stumbled in around 2 a.m., a little too tipsy, she was acting weird. She kissed me, barely said anything, and passed out. At the time, I was just irritated because I was trying to sleep, but looking back, I should have noticed the signs. The real bombshell came when I was getting ready to head out for a quick errand. I was walking through the house when I noticed her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. Normally, she takes it everywhere with her. So I wasn't thinking clearly. I just picked it up to text her something about dinner later. But then, my thumb hit the lock screen, and for whatever reason, I tried one of her old passwords. I don't know why. It wasn't like I planned on snooping. But it worked. I unlocked her phone. I should have just left it there, but something inside me told me I needed to see. I went straight for her messages. And that's when I saw it. Her conversation with him. The guy she'd been texting for weeks. It wasn't just harmless small talk either. It was a full-on affair. The texts were sexual, flirty, and full of promises to meet up. There were mentions of sneaking away for weekends, jokes about when are we getting together for some fun, and some graphic stuff I really didn't want to read but couldn't stop. I was frozen. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to process what I was looking at. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was having an affair with someone. And not just any affair. She was sleeping with him, and I had been completely oblivious. I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront her right away? Should I wait? Should I gather more proof? I didn't know what was worse. Finding out or knowing she'd been lying to me for God knows how long. I don't know what I was expecting, but I sure wasn't ready for how it all went down. I let the phone slip from my hands, my stomach churning. I didn't know if I should be angry, hurt, or just in complete shock. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. When Julia woke up a few hours later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, holding my breath, trying to act normal. I didn't want to make it obvious that I knew. She walked in, bleary-eyed and a little hungover, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," she mumbled, barely glancing at me before grabbing a coffee. I couldn't take it anymore. "Who's Brian?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. She froze. The color drained from her face for a split second, but then she recovered, plastering a fake smile on. "What are you talking about?" she asked, too casually. "You're texting him. The guy you've been seeing behind my back," I said, barely containing my rage. I didn't even care anymore about the words, just the fact that she thought I wouldn't find out. Her face contorted in surprise, but then it was like a switch flipped. The defensive tone kicked in immediately. "What are you accusing me of? You know how I feel about trust and privacy. Why would you look at my phone?" She tried to deflect, but it was all too obvious. She was stalling, trying to cover her tracks. I didn't back down. "I saw the text, Julia. I saw the messages. Don't lie to me." She sighed, throwing her hands up in exaggerated frustration. "Oh, my God. Are you seriously doing this right now? You know what? Fine. Yes, I've been talking to someone. But it's not what you think." She suddenly sounded so defensive, her voice getting sharper. "You've been so distant lately. You don't understand how hard it's been for me. I needed someone to talk to. Someone who listens. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So it's my fault you cheated on me? You're blaming me for your affair? No, I'm not saying that, she snapped, rolling her eyes. It's just things haven't been the same between us. You don't pay attention to me anymore. I've been feeling neglected. I could feel my face flushing with anger. You couldn't have just talked to me? You couldn't have told me you were unhappy? Instead, you go behind my back and sleep with some guy? She went on with her excuses, deflecting the blame onto everything but herself. She started crying, telling me how hard everything had been, how confused she was, how she was just looking for attention. It was so typical. It felt like she was gaslighting me, twisting the situation to make it about her pain, not the betrayal she'd inflicted on me. In that moment, I realized something. I had never seen her so cold and calculating, and I was done. It's crazy how quickly everything changes. One moment, I was just a guy going about his life, trusting his wife, and the next, my world was falling apart. I sat there, listening to Julia spill out her excuses, and I couldn't focus on anything except the pounding in my head. I wasn't even sure if I was angry or just completely numb. What hurt the most, I think, was how easy she made it seem. The lies came so naturally to her, like she'd been rehearsing them. I needed attention. I was feeling neglected. You didn't notice me anymore. It was like a script she had memorized for moments like this. All the while, I just kept seeing the images of their conversations in my head, the explicit texts, the promises to meet up. How could she do this to me? How could she act so nonchalant about destroying everything we'd built? I tried to keep calm. I really did. But then, as she sat there, still talking about how complicated everything was, I just lost it. The anger I had been holding back flooded my chest. I stood up, fists clenched, and I shouted, "You don't get to play the victim here, Julia. You cheated on me. You betrayed me. This isn't about neglect. This is about you lying and sneaking around behind my back." Her face twisted, not in guilt, but in annoyance, like she couldn't believe I was making such a big deal out of it. "Oh, here we go," she scoffed. "You're so dramatic. It wasn't even that serious. It's just sex, not like I'm leaving you for him." That was the moment I knew. I was done. I had spent 8 years with this woman, and this was how she saw it? Like it was nothing? Like I was just some guy she was stuck with while she had her fun on the side? The tears came then. Not the kind of tears I wanted, not the kind where I was sobbing over the loss of love. It was rage and hurt mixed into one, a boiling, suffocating feeling that made my chest tight. How could she look at me with such indifference after everything we'd been through? After the vows, the promises? I sat back down, feeling like I couldn't breathe, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to scream at her to leave, to never come back, but part of me still wanted some explanation, some real apology. But I knew deep down I wasn't going to get that. I was heartbroken, angry, and betrayed. And for the first time in years, I didn't know who Julia really was. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. The silence that fell between us after that explosion of emotion was suffocating. Julia was still sitting there, her face a mix of annoyance and defensiveness, like she couldn't understand why I was so upset. I couldn't believe it. How could she sit there so calmly after everything? How was she not begging for my forgiveness? Or at least showing some kind of remorse? But no. Instead, she kept talking. The same excuses, the same half apologies, the same, "I didn't mean to hurt you" crap. I could barely listen to her anymore. In my head, all I could think about was how I'd been made a fool of, how I'd been married to a woman who could look me in the eye and lie so easily. I stood up again, pacing the room, trying to make sense of everything. Part of me wanted to scream at her, throw everything she owned out the door, and never look back. But the other part, the part that still clung to memories of good times, the man who had been in love with her, wanted to try and salvage something. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping she'd snap out of her selfish haze and realize what she was throwing away. But deep down, I knew she wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. "Julia," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of hurt and fury. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. You've broken my trust, and I can't pretend like everything is fine anymore. You're right about one thing, though." She looked up at me, still defensive. "This isn't just about sex. It's about how you've treated me, how you've treated us. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, and now you expect me to just move past it? Like it's no big deal? She opened her mouth to say something, but I raised my hand, silencing her. I don't want to hear it, Julia. I've heard enough. I stood there for a few seconds, watching her face twist in frustration and confusion. And that's when it hit me. I had to make a decision. This couldn't just be about her anymore. I had to think about myself, about what I needed. Here's the thing, I said, my voice steady now. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I even want to try. But I can't keep living in this lie. So I think we need some space. A lot of space. I'm done pretending. I'm done with the excuses. Her eyes widened. And for the first time since this whole mess started, she seemed genuinely shocked. Wait, you're just done? Her voice cracked, but there was no real emotion behind it. Just disbelief. Yeah, I am, I replied, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. I don't want to fix this. Not with you. Not when you can't even own up to what you've done. She sat back in her chair, staring at me like she didn't understand what was happening. And maybe, in a way, she didn't, but I was past the point of caring. I knew what I had to do. I'm leaving, I said, grabbing my keys and wallet. And I'm not coming back until I can figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do next. I could hear her start to say something, but I didn't stick around to hear it. I walked out the door, and as soon as it closed behind me, I felt a wave of clarity. It hurt like hell, but I knew I couldn't stay in that relationship anymore. Not with the woman I'd married. Not when everything I thought I knew had been a lie. It's been a couple of weeks since I walked out on Julia, and I'm still processing everything. I didn't expect it to be easy, but I also didn't expect the emotional roller coaster it's turned out to be. One minute, I'm angry, the next I'm sad, and sometimes I even feel relief. It's been confusing, to say the least. Here's the thing, though. I've learned a lot through all of this. More than I ever thought I would. First off, I've realized just how much I was sacrificing of myself for the sake of the marriage. I've been so focused on keeping things together, on ignoring the small signs, on making excuses for her behavior, that I lost sight of my own worth. I thought if I loved her enough, I could make it work. But love isn't enough when it's one-sided. Julia's affair was a wake-up call. I'd been so blind to the cracks in our relationship, thinking that if I just kept doing the right things, if I kept being the good husband, everything would be fine. But she had already checked out. She was emotionally and physically disconnected long before I found out, and I couldn't see it. It's hard to admit that I missed all the signs, but I did, and I won't make that mistake again. The hardest part wasn't the affair itself. It was the complete lack of respect she had for me. The way she lied, the way she blamed me for everything, the way she dismissed my pain. I didn't deserve that. No one does. And as much as I still care for her in some twisted way, I can't ignore the fact that she betrayed me in the worst possible way. I've also realized that I don't need to rush into decisions. Everyone tells me I need to move on or find someone else, but I'm not ready for that. Right now, I'm focusing on myself. I'm rediscovering who I am outside of being Julia's husband. I've started doing things I used to enjoy before all this chaos. I'm working on myself, mentally, emotionally, and physically. As for Julia, I've given her space, but I haven't completely cut her off. She's tried to reach out a few times, but honestly, I don't know what to say to her. I don't think I'll ever look at her the same way again. If she wants to try and fix things, she has a hell of a lot to prove. But right now, I'm not interested in reconciliation. Maybe someday if she does the hard work of understanding what she did, but not right now. To anyone reading this who's been in a similar situation, take a step back. Don't let yourself be blinded by love or nostalgia. Trust your gut and don't settle for being someone's second choice. The pain of betrayal will always sting, but in the end, it's better to walk away than stay stuck in a toxic situation. I'm still figuring out the future, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never going to let someone disrespect me like that again. It's been a painful journey, but I'm finally starting to understand my worth. And that's the most important lesson of all. It's been a few months now since the confrontation, and I can honestly say I'm in a much better place than I was back then. It's been a painful journey, no doubt, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline. It's been slow, but it's been real. One of the first things I did after everything blew up was take a step back from all the chaos. I didn't jump into therapy immediately, though in hindsight, I probably should have. Instead, I spent a lot of time alone, reflecting on what happened and figuring out what I wanted moving forward. There were days when I just wanted to bury myself in work or distractions, but I realized that facing the pain head-on was the only way I was going to heal. I've started doing things I used to love. I got back into running, something I had completely neglected over the years. There's something therapeutic about hitting the pavement and just zoning out. I also took a solo trip to the mountains just to clear my head and gain some perspective. It felt like I was reconnecting with myself in a way I hadn't in a long time. It wasn't easy, though. I'd catch myself thinking about Julia, what she was doing, how she was handling everything. It was hard to cut off those thoughts because, despite everything, I still cared. But I had to remind myself that I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for me. And the truth was, as much as I cared about the woman I married, she wasn't the same person anymore. And neither was I. Eventually, I did start therapy. It was tough, but I'm glad I did. I realized I was carrying around so much guilt, anger, and confusion. But talking about it with a professional helped me untangle all those emotions. I had to learn to forgive myself first, because for a long time, I felt like I'd failed. But I didn't fail. I was just trying to make something work that wasn't meant to. And that's okay. The hardest part, by far, was accepting that some people will just never see the damage they cause. Julia hasn't changed. She's still the same person she was when I found out about the affair. Narcissistic, defensive, and unwilling to take full responsibility for what she did. She's tried reaching out a few more times, sending me texts like, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about us," but I haven't responded. Every time I think about responding, I remember that the woman who betrayed me is not the woman I thought I knew. So I've made peace with the idea that we're done. Maybe she'll change one day, but I'm no longer waiting for that. I'm finally moving on. To anyone else who's dealing with betrayal, it's hard, really hard. But trust yourself and know that there's a future beyond the pain. You're worth more than being someone's backup plan. Don't let yourself get stuck in the past or in someone who doesn't value you. You're allowed to walk away and take your time to rebuild. And when you do, you'll find that you're stronger than you ever thought possible. That's where I'm at now. I'm stronger. I'm healing. And I'm excited for whatever comes next. As I reflect back on everything that's happened, it's hard not to think about the person I was before the betrayal. I used to be a man who thought he had everything figured out. Someone who believed in loyalty, in the strength of relationships, in the power of love. I believed that if I loved my partner deeply enough, everything else would fall into place. I always prided myself on being understanding, patient, and supportive, often putting Julia's needs above my own. It wasn't that I didn't have my own dreams and goals, but I always felt like I was making room for her to be happy, as if my happiness was secondary. But after the affair, after the lies and the deceit, I came face to face with a reality I didn't want to accept. My identity had been intertwined with the idea of being a good husband, a partner who made sacrifices for the sake of his relationship. That's how I saw myself. But in doing so, I had given up pieces of who I truly was, pieces that I had never fully gotten back. Rebuilding myself wasn't just about healing from the heartbreak. It was about rediscovering who I was outside of the relationship. I had always been so focused on being the best partner I could be that I had stopped investing in the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. The more I distanced myself from Julia, the more I realized how much I had let slip away over the years. I had neglected friendships, hobbies, and passions that once meant everything to me. The running I started doing after the breakup was more than just physical exercise. It was a mental and emotional release. The act of pushing myself physically, of setting goals and achieving them, gave me a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in a long time. The first few weeks were hard, I won't lie. My mind was clouded with anger and sadness, and it felt like I could never fully escape those thoughts. But running became a meditation of sorts, a way to clear the mental clutter and focus on the present. I had always been a runner before, though never at any serious level, but it was a part of me that I had forgotten. I started running longer distances, signing up for races, and setting new personal records. At first, I was doing it just to occupy my mind, but soon I realized I was doing it for myself, for my own growth, my own strength, and my own happiness. Every time I completed a run, I felt a little stronger, a little more like the person I used to be. There was a moment one evening, after a particularly difficult run, when I sat down on the curb, breathing heavily, and realized something profound. I wasn't just running to escape. I was running toward something, toward a better version of myself. And that realization changed everything. I also picked up an old hobby that I had completely abandoned, photography. It had been something I enjoyed doing in my free time before life got too busy. I started taking my camera out on weekend trips, capturing landscapes, nature, and cityscapes. I'd always loved the creative process of framing a shot, of capturing something beautiful or unique. I realized that this was another way of reconnecting with myself. When I was behind the lens, everything else faded away. There were no distractions, no worries, just the world through my eyes. What struck me most about rediscovering these parts of myself was how quickly I realized how much I had forgotten about what I loved. I had been so consumed by the relationship, by trying to make Julia happy, that I forgot about the things that brought me joy in the first place. It wasn't that I didn't care about my marriage. I did, and I still do. But the truth is, I had lost sight of who I was as an individual. I had allowed myself to get swallowed up by the relationship, by the idea of being a husband, and it was only when I walked away that I realized I had forgotten how to just be me. This journey of rediscovery has been painful, but it has also been enlightening. I've learned that happiness doesn't come from someone else. It doesn't come from constantly sacrificing your own well-being for the sake of a partner or a relationship. True happiness comes from within, from finding fulfillment in your own passions and experiences. And I think that's what I was missing all along. I thought I needed to fix the marriage, fix Julia, fix everything around me. But what I needed to fix was myself. I also had to confront the guilt I carried for so long. After Julia's affair, I found myself blaming myself. I kept wondering what I did wrong. Was I not enough for her? Was I too distant? Too consumed with my work? Was I not paying enough attention to her needs? But the more I worked through this guilt, the more I realized that none of this was my fault. She made a choice. She betrayed my trust. And I wasn't the one who made that decision. I wasn't the one who chose to lie, to cheat, to break our vows. I think that's one of the hardest things to accept after being betrayed, the constant self-blame. You want to find something you could have done differently, something you could have fixed. But the reality is it wasn't about me. It was about her and the choices she made. I could have been the perfect husband, and it still wouldn't have stopped her from making that decision. That's the hardest pill to swallow, but also the most freeing one. Now I'm focusing on letting go of that guilt. I'm working on forgiving myself. I've started to realize that I don't need to carry the weight of her mistakes. I don't need to make her betrayal my burden. I've learned that healing comes not just from moving forward, but from accepting that some things are out of our control. And what I can control is how I choose to live my life now. At the same time, I've realized that I can't rush into anything. I'm not in a place where I'm ready for a new relationship. And honestly, I don't know when or if I'll be ready. But I'm not forcing myself to move on. I'm letting it happen naturally. And in the meantime, I'm enjoying my life again, really enjoying it. I'm learning to embrace the small moments, the quiet days, the freedom to live for myself. I think that's what I'm most grateful for, this newfound sense of self. The man who was once consumed by a toxic relationship is slowly coming back to life. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way, and that's something worth celebrating. If anyone is reading this and going through something similar, just know that it gets better. It might not feel like it now, but it will. You're allowed to take the time you need to heal, and you don't have to rush the process. Be patient with yourself, and don't forget the things that make you feel alive. You'll get through this, and you'll come out stronger. I know I have. As time passes, the raw pain of betrayal becomes more manageable, though it never completely goes away. I'm not sure it ever will, and I've come to terms with that. The truth is, you don't just get over something like this. You learn to live with it. You make peace with the past, and you focus on the future, but the scars remain. They fade over time, Yes, but they never disappear entirely. And in some strange way, that's okay. I'm learning that healing isn't about erasing the hurt. It's about integrating it into who you are, accepting it as part of your story, and moving on in spite of it. One of the hardest things I've had to face is the constant reminder of what once was. There are still moments when I catch myself thinking about Julia, the way we used to be, the good times we had, and the future I thought we would share. It's strange how memories can be both comforting and painful at the same time. On some days, it feels like a soft ache in the back of my mind, like a nostalgic longing for something that's gone. On others, it's sharper, more biting, like a reminder that I was deceived. It's a constant battle of emotions that I never fully expected. I can't tell you how many times I've found myself replaying the moments when everything started to fall apart. The signs were there, the feeling of distance, the unexplained absences, the moments when I felt like something was off. But I ignored it. I didn't want to see it. Maybe I didn't want to admit that my perfect little world was about to crumble. Or maybe I just trusted her so completely that I refused to acknowledge the possibility of betrayal. I think that's one of the toughest realizations. How blind you can be when you trust someone. You don't want to believe that the person you love could do something like that to you. It's a defense mechanism, I guess. Your brain doesn't want to accept the truth because it's too painful. But now, looking back, I can see it all so clearly. The lies were there. The distance was there. I just refused to see it. One of the most difficult things to accept was how Julia handled everything afterward. When we talked about the affair, when I confronted her about it, her reaction was infuriating. It wasn't remorse, it wasn't regret, it was an excuse. It wasn't serious, she kept saying, it was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. She downplayed the whole thing like it was no big deal. But for me, it was everything. It was a betrayal of trust, of love, of everything we had built together. And for her, it was just an oops. How could she not see the damage she caused? But I've come to accept something important. Her lack of remorse is a reflection of who she is, not who I am. It's her inability to own her actions, her refusal to take full responsibility for what she did. That's not my problem anymore. The person who wronged me is the one who has to live with the consequences of their actions, not me. And as hard as it is, I can't let her lack of accountability define how I move forward. And moving forward is exactly what I'm doing. It's been an uphill climb, no question about it. There are still days when I find myself missing parts of our life together. The routine we had, the shared memories, even the things that annoyed me, like how she always left her shoes in the hallway or the way she would hog the blankets. All those small, intimate things that you never realize matter until they're gone. But as I sit with those thoughts, I've realized that the past, no matter how painful, is behind me now. I can't keep holding on to it. I can't keep living in the shadow of what was. The person I am now is not the same as the one who was betrayed. I've grown, I've learned, and I've come to understand what I want out of life and what I won't settle for. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone the way I trusted Julia again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I do know that I'm not going to rush into anything. I'm not in a place where I'm looking for a relationship, and I don't think I will be for a while. What I want right now is stability, both in my own life and in my heart. In the meantime, I'm learning how to navigate the world on my own. There's a sense of freedom in that. I've started to explore new interests, things I never thought I'd have time for. I've joined a few clubs, started reading more, and even began traveling again. There's so much out there that I haven't seen or experienced. I can't let the past keep me stuck in a place of regret or sorrow. Life is too short to live that way. And I'm not saying everything is perfect. I still have bad days. There are nights when I lie awake in bed, thinking about everything I've lost. There are moments when I wish I had done things differently, or when I wonder if I'll ever find someone who truly understands me. But I also know that I can't base my future on the mistakes of my past. I can't allow my experiences to dictate who I am today. The person I'm becoming is not defined by betrayal. It's defined by how I choose to rise above it. I think one of the most important lessons I've learned is that healing is not linear. It's messy, and it's painful, and it's often unpredictable. But that's okay. It's all part of the process. And as much as I wish I could just move on and forget the pain, I know that's not how it works. So I'm taking it one step at a time, one day at a time, and learning to accept that it's okay to feel both strong and vulnerable at the same time. For anyone who's been in a similar situation, I want to say this: don't let the pain define you. It may shape you, but it doesn't have to control you. Give yourself the space to grieve, but also the room to grow. You deserve to heal, and you deserve to live a life that's yours. The past doesn't have to define your future. Keep moving forward, even when it feels like you're stumbling. One day, you'll look back and realize just how far you've come. And when that day comes, you'll see that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. It's been almost a year now since I first discovered Julia's affair, and the journey I've been on has been nothing short of transformative. Looking back, I never could have predicted how much this betrayal would change me, not just in terms of my relationship with her, but also in how I view myself and the world around me. What I thought would break me ended up being the catalyst for growth in ways I didn't know were possible. One of the most surprising aspects of this whole experience is how much I've learned about vulnerability. Before everything fell apart, I always considered myself a strong, independent guy. I prided myself on handling things on my own and not needing anyone's help. But when Julia cheated, I was forced to confront a part of myself I hadn't been willing to face: the fear of being vulnerable, of opening myself up to pain. I thought vulnerability was a weakness, something to avoid at all costs. But in the months since the affair, I've come to realize that vulnerability is actually one of the strongest things a person can have. When everything came crashing down, I had to let go of my pride. I had to admit that I was hurt, that I was lost, that I didn't have all the answers. It felt like a failure at first, like I was losing control of myself. But as I allowed myself to feel the pain, to cry, to be angry, I started to understand that there's strength in accepting your emotions. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have everything figured out. What matters is that I'm able to sit with the discomfort, to process it, and to keep moving forward even when it feels impossible. At first, I was terrified of confronting the pain. I didn't want to feel weak. I didn't want to acknowledge how much I had been hurt. But slowly, I began to understand that the more I tried to bury those feelings, the longer they would control me. By allowing myself to be vulnerable, I started to release the hold that the betrayal had on me. It wasn't easy. It took time, therapy, and a lot of self-reflection, but I came to realize that my vulnerability didn't make me weak. It made me human. As part of this journey, I've also come to appreciate the power of boundaries. For years, I had been the type of person who wanted to avoid conflict, who didn't want to rock the boat. I always thought that if I just kept the peace, everything would work out. But I've learned that boundaries are crucial in maintaining a sense of self-worth and protecting your emotional well-being. Setting boundaries doesn't mean being selfish or cutting people off. It means knowing your limits, understanding what you need to feel safe and respected, and communicating those needs clearly. When Julia reached out a few months after the affair, I struggled with whether or not I should respond. Part of me still missed her, the version of her I thought I knew, the woman I had loved for so many years. But another part of me knew that responding would only reopen old wounds, would only allow her to pull me back into the emotional chaos I had fought so hard to escape. I had to make a choice, and that choice was to protect myself. Setting boundaries isn't always easy, especially when emotions are still raw. But I've realized that saying no, saying I can't be a part of this right now, is a way of saying yes to my own healing, my own future. It's a way of taking control of my life and not allowing someone else's actions to dictate my worth or my happiness. I've also started to recognize the value of the people around me. When I first found out about the affair, I withdrew from everyone. I didn't want anyone to pity me. I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to be left alone. But over time, I've come to see the importance of community, of friends who support you, of family who cares for you, of people who are willing to listen without judgment. I realized that I didn't have to carry this burden alone, and that opening up to the people who love me didn't make me weak. It made me stronger. I've reconnected with old friends who had drifted away over the years. Some of them knew about Julia's affair before I did and had been hesitant to bring it up. They didn't want to hurt me, and I understand that now. But having them by my side again has been invaluable. There's something cathartic about talking through the experience with people who understand what you've been through, who don't minimize your pain or try to rush you through the healing process. They let me be angry, sad, and confused, and they didn't try to fix me. Instead, they reminded me of the person I used to be, the strong, capable man who had a lot to offer the world. Through all of this, I've learned that healing isn't linear. There are still days when I wake up and feel the weight of the betrayal, days when I question if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. There are nights when I miss the intimacy I shared with Julia, when I long for the life we had before everything fell apart. But I've come to realize that these moments don't define me. They don't control me. They are simply part of the process, part of the journey of healing. I allow myself to feel them, but I don't let them consume me. I've also learned the importance of patience. Patience with myself, with the process, with life. Healing takes time, and sometimes it feels like there's no end in sight. But I've come to trust that as long as I keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps may be, I'll get to where I need to be. I don't have to have it all figured out right now. I just have to keep going. And you know what? There's something incredibly freeing about that. For so long, I felt like I had to have all the answers, like I had to be in control of every aspect of my life. But now, I've learned that it's okay to not know what comes next. It's okay to take things day by day, to embrace the uncertainty. Life is a way of unfolding in unexpected ways, and sometimes the best thing you can do is trust that things will work out in their own time. For anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I want to say this. Be kind to yourself. You are not defined by your pain, by the betrayal, or by the choices of others. You are stronger than you know, and even though it might not seem like it now, the day will come when you realize that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. It might take time, and it might take work, but you will get there. And when you do, you'll be a stronger, more self-aware person than you ever thought possible. And that's the most powerful lesson I've learned. Vulnerability, boundaries, patience, and strength all coexist. The man I am now is not the man I was before the affair, but I'm okay with that. I'm better for it, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. It's strange, almost surreal, to think about where I am now compared to where I was a year ago. The person I am today is completely different from the one who found out about Julia's affair. I've had to redefine everything, my beliefs, my boundaries, my understanding of love and relationships. And in many ways, I've learned that life is never as simple as we hope it to be. We often think we know exactly what we want, but the truth is, life is a way of throwing curveballs that force us to reevaluate our entire existence. One of the hardest things I've had to come to terms with is the idea of love. Before all of this happened, I was a firm believer that love was enough to get through anything. I thought that if you loved someone deeply enough, all the problems, all the struggles would somehow fade into the background. But after Julia's affair, I realized how naive that thinking was. Love, as it turns out, isn't the sole foundation of a relationship. Trust, respect, communication, and shared values are just as important, if not more so. For a while, I questioned whether I'd ever be able to love again, let alone trust someone. The thought of opening myself up to that kind of vulnerability after what happened with Julia seemed impossible. I couldn't imagine putting myself in a situation where I might be hurt again. But as the months have passed, I've come to understand that while trust is fragile, it can be rebuilt. It's not an instant process, but it's possible with the right person and with the right mindset. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what I really want out of life moving forward. The things that once seemed so important, success at work, having the perfect relationship, keeping up appearances, no longer hold the same weight. In some ways, the affair was a wake-up call for me. It made me realize that life is too short to live in a way that doesn't fulfill me. I want more than just a good job or a picture-perfect relationship. I want to feel alive, to experience joy, to be in a relationship where mutual respect and understanding come first. I've been dating again, tentatively, cautiously. It's hard to let someone in when you've been hurt so deeply, but I've been taking my time, allowing myself to be vulnerable again, but on my own terms. I'm not in a rush to get into a relationship. I'm not looking to fill the emptiness left by Julia's betrayal. Instead, I'm looking for someone who values me for who I am, who is willing to communicate openly and honestly, and who doesn't take loyalty for granted. And honestly, that's something I never realized I needed before. Dating now is different. I'm no longer blinded by idealism, and I've learned not to settle for less than I deserve. I'm no longer the person who's willing to ignore red flags for the sake of avoiding conflict or keeping the peace. I've learned to speak up when something doesn't sit right with me. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut, and to set boundaries early on in relationships. It's refreshing in a way I can't quite explain, empowering even. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm making choices for me, not based on anyone else's expectations. At the same time, I've learned to be patient with myself. There are still days when I question whether I'm really ready to open myself up to someone else. The fear of getting hurt again is real, and it doesn't just vanish because I want it to, but I've also realized that fear is a natural part of the process. It's okay to take things slow, to not rush into something new just to fill the gap left by the past. The right relationship will come when I'm ready for it, and I don't have to force it. It's not just in relationships that I've been redefining my expectations, either. I've been setting new goals for myself in every aspect of my life. I've always been someone who worked hard, often to the point of exhaustion, to achieve success in my career. But after everything that's happened, I've realized that success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder or meeting deadlines. It's about finding balance, about pursuing what truly matters to me, about living a life that feels fulfilling rather than just productive. I've been focusing more on enjoying the present moment, taking time off when I need it, and reconnecting with passions I'd long forgotten. I've also traveled more in the past few months than I had in years. Something about exploring new places, experiencing new cultures, and stepping out of my comfort zone has been incredibly healing. There's something cathartic about seeing the world outside the bubble of your daily life. It's a reminder that the world is so much bigger than the pain of betrayal, that life offers endless possibilities if you're willing to embrace them. But perhaps the most important change I've made has been how I view myself. In the past, I based my sense of self-worth on my relationship with Julia. I thought I needed her to feel whole, to feel like I mattered. But now, I've realized that my worth is not defined by anyone else, not by a failed marriage or the mistakes of others. I'm valuable because I exist, because I've worked through the pain, because I'm choosing to keep moving forward. And in doing so, I've reclaimed my sense of power. This entire journey has been about rediscovery, about learning who I am again after everything I thought I knew was shattered. And while it hasn't been easy, I can honestly say that I'm a better version of myself now than I was before. I'm more compassionate toward myself, more aware of my needs and boundaries, and more in tune with what makes me happy. I'm still figuring it all out, and maybe I always will be, but that's okay. I don't have to have it all figured out. As I look ahead, I feel a sense of hope that I haven't felt in a long time. I'm excited about the future, not because I expect it to be perfect, but because I know that I'm stronger now. I've faced one of the hardest experiences a person can go through, and I've come out the other side with a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. I know there will be more challenges ahead, but I also know that I'm capable of facing them. Whatever comes my way, I'll handle it, because now I know that I'm enough, just as I am. To anyone going through a similar situation, I want you to know that healing is possible. It may not feel like it right now, but trust me when I say that you are capable of moving forward, of finding happiness again. Don't rush the process. Don't force yourself to get over it before you're ready. Take your time. And when you're ready, you'll step into the next chapter of your life, not as someone defined by pain, but as someone who's learned to rise above it. You'll be better for it. I promise. When I look back at everything I've gone through, I realize that one of the most important aspects of my healing process was learning to embrace solitude. I know that might sound strange, but hear me out. After everything with Julia, there was a constant pressure to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Whether it was moving on to a new relationship, going back to old routines, or forcing myself to be happy again just because people around me expected it. But the truth is I needed time alone, time to understand who I really was without the influence of anyone else. At first, being alone was terrifying. The silence felt oppressive. My mind was constantly racing, replaying conversations, events, and what-ifs. The pain felt so overwhelming, and I was afraid that being alone would only intensify it. But over time, I came to realize that solitude was a powerful tool for healing. I didn't need anyone else to define who I was or to tell me what my next step should be. I needed to look inward and reclaim my sense of self, separate from my past relationships and my experiences with betrayal. I remember the first weekend I spent alone. It was strange. At first, I couldn't get used to the quiet. I kept expecting Julia to call or text or show up unannounced like she always had before. But she didn't. And after the initial shock, I started to appreciate the stillness. I began to enjoy my own company, something I hadn't done in years. I would wake up, make myself coffee, and just sit on the balcony, watching the sunrise, taking in the beauty of the world without needing anyone to share it with. It wasn't loneliness, it was peace. For the first time in ages, I was able to reflect on the person I had become before Julia came into my life. I thought about the hobbies I had put aside, the dreams I had forgotten. I used to love painting, something I hadn't touched since I met her. So, one night I bought some paints and started again. The first few strokes were awkward and uncertain, but soon enough, the act of painting became an escape, a way to express the emotions I couldn't put into words. It felt good to do something just for myself, with no one else's approval or opinion weighing me down. Solitude also gave me the chance to finally sit with my emotions in a way that felt healthy. I wasn't drowning in distractions anymore, and I wasn't trying to fill the silence with thoughts of Julia or our failed relationship. I allowed myself to feel anger when it came up and sadness when I missed the life I thought I had. But there were also moments of joy, moments where I rediscovered a piece of myself I had lost in the chaos of the past few years. I was learning to be whole again, to love myself as I was, not as a reflection of anyone else's desires or expectations. I also spent a lot of time reflecting on what I wanted in the future. I think this is where many people get stuck after a betrayal, especially when they've been so enmeshed in a relationship for so long. It's easy to lose sight of your own identity, to let the desires of your partner become your own. But when you've been shaken by something as profound as infidelity, it forces you to rethink your entire life. You start to question what you actually want, as opposed to what you thought you should want. One thing became very clear to me. I wanted more than just a relationship that looked good on paper. I wanted honesty, transparency, and deep emotional intimacy. I wanted to feel safe in my own skin, not constantly questioning if the person I was with was being truthful or hiding something. The idea of love being unconditional and unbreakable no longer seemed idealistic to me. It felt like a fantasy. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and without it, no amount of love can make things work. But there was something else I learned during this time. I don't need a partner to feel complete. For so long, I had been conditioned to think that a successful relationship was the key to happiness and fulfillment. But now, I see that happiness has to come from within first. I needed to reconnect with myself before I could give anything to someone else. And that's when I realized how much I had been hiding from myself. The little things that used to make me happy, the quiet moments I used to cherish, things like reading a book in the park or cooking a new recipe, were all put aside for the sake of the relationship. Julia had become my entire world, and I had neglected the small joys that made me who I was. In reclaiming my solitude, I was also reclaiming these pieces of myself. Of course, there were moments when the silence became overwhelming again. There were nights when I still felt that pang of loneliness, when I missed the companionship and connection of a partner. But I've come to learn that those feelings aren't inherently bad. They are simply a reminder that I'm human, and that I'm capable of love and connection. But more importantly, they remind me that I don't need someone to validate my worth. As I reflect on the past year, I realize that solitude has been an essential part of my healing journey. It hasn't been easy, and there were days when I didn't know if I could bear it. But I've learned to appreciate the time alone, the space it's given me to rediscover who I am, and the clarity it's provided in helping me figure out what I want in the future. I've also come to realize that I'm not in a rush. I don't need to dive into a new relationship right now, nor do I need to prove anything to anyone. I've spent enough of my life chasing external validation, trying to make others happy, trying to make everything look perfect on the outside. But now, I'm focused on what truly matters: my own growth, my own peace of mind, and my own happiness. There's a strength that comes from embracing solitude, from learning to sit with yourself and be content in your own company. It's not about being alone for the sake of it. It's about recognizing the power in having the space to heal and reflect. It's about accepting that I don't need anyone else to complete me. I'm whole as I am. And from that place of wholeness, I can build a life that's aligned with my values and aspirations. For anyone reading this who's also navigating the aftermath of betrayal, I can't recommend enough the importance of solitude in your healing process. It's not easy, and it's not always comfortable, but it is necessary. You won't find the answers you need by constantly seeking others' opinions or rushing into a new relationship. The answers are inside you, they always have been. And by spending time alone, you give yourself the space to find them. Embrace the quiet, embrace the time to reflect, and remember that healing takes time. You will come out of this stronger, more self-aware, and ready to move forward when the time is right. And when that time comes, you'll be amazed at how much you've grown. It's almost ironic how the most painful chapters of your life can also be the ones that lead you to the most transformative growth. If someone had told me, right after Julia's betrayal, that I would one day be able to look back at the entire experience and feel a sense of gratitude for what it taught me, I would have laughed. At the time, I was consumed by rage and heartbreak, drowning in the confusion of how everything fell apart so quickly. But here I am, months later, and I can honestly say that I've come out of it stronger, more self-aware, and more determined to create a future that's aligned with my own values. I think one of the hardest parts of moving forward after infidelity is that there's no one right way to do it. You don't just wake up one day and decide that everything is okay. The scars are still there, even if they've started to fade. The emotional baggage still lingers, sometimes showing up when you least expect it. The grief of losing not only the person you thought you would spend your life with, but also the dreams and plans you had for the future. It doesn't just go away. But what I've learned, perhaps the most valuable lesson in all of this, is that moving forward doesn't mean erasing the past. It means accepting it, learning from it, and then choosing to live your life in a way that reflects the lessons you've gained from that experience. I'm not trying to forget what happened. I'm not pretending that I didn't feel the sting of betrayal or the anger that came with it. But I've come to a point where I can acknowledge the pain, honor it, and then release it. I don't need to carry it with me anymore. In the past few months, I've started taking real steps toward rebuilding my life. The first major step I took was to finally move out of the house Julia and I had shared. I'd been holding on to it for so long, hoping that somehow it would turn back into the home I once dreamed of, a place filled with warmth, love, and togetherness. But it never would be again. It was a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Every room echoed with memories of better times, of promises that had been broken. And the longer I stayed, the harder it became to move forward. I found a small apartment, just for me. It's nothing extravagant, but it's mine. I was surprised by how liberating that was. Having my own space where I could start fresh, where I could build a new chapter of my life without any reminders of the past lurking around every corner. I took my time decorating, filling it with things that reflected who I am now, not who I was. There's something symbolic about creating a new space for yourself. It's like saying to the universe, I'm ready for the next phase. I'm ready to move on, and I'm ready to do it on my own terms. Another big step I took was focusing on my personal growth. After everything with Julia, I realized that I had neglected myself for far too long. I had been so wrapped up in the relationship, so focused on making her happy, that I lost sight of my own happiness. I began taking up new activities, things I had always wanted to try, but never had the time or energy for. I joined a local hiking group, something that's always fascinated me, but that I had put off for years. There's something so grounding about being outdoors, surrounded by nature, that gives me a sense of peace. It's been a reminder that life is full of beauty and wonder, and it doesn't always have to be tied to someone else. I also started focusing more on my career, something I had somewhat neglected during my marriage. With the space to focus on myself again, I found that my passion for my work was reignited. I had been so caught up in the drama and pain of my relationship that I didn't even realize how much of myself I had poured into someone else. But now, I'm pouring that energy back into myself, and it feels amazing. I'm more focused, more driven, and more excited about what the future holds. The possibilities feel endless, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own destiny. In addition to all of this, I've been exploring new connections, but in a way that feels true to who I am now. I'm not rushing into a new relationship to fill the void left by Julia. I'm not looking for someone to replace her. Instead, I'm simply open to meeting new people and forming genuine connections without any pressure. There's a freedom in knowing that I don't need a partner to feel complete. But if the right person comes along, someone who aligns with my values and respects my boundaries, I'm open to seeing where it goes. But here's the most important thing I've learned. Moving forward doesn't mean perfection. There are still days when I miss Julia. There are still moments when the loneliness creeps in. There are still triggers, songs, places, even smells that bring back memories of our time together. I've learned not to fight those moments, but to accept them. They don't define me. They're simply pieces of the puzzle that make up who I am. And as I continue to heal, those pieces will eventually fade into the background, replaced by new, more fulfilling experiences. I've come to understand that life is a series of ups and downs, and while some of those downs can feel insurmountable, they don't last forever. The hard times, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they are not permanent. And as long as you keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps may feel, you'll get to a place where the pain no longer dominates your life. You'll come out stronger, wiser, and more equipped to handle whatever comes next. For anyone who is reading this and feeling lost, broken, or unsure of how to move forward after a betrayal, I want to share this. It's okay to take your time. There's no timeline for healing, no right way to do it. What matters is that you keep moving forward, even if it's just one tiny step at a time. Be kind to yourself. Let go of the guilt, the shame, and the self-blame. You are worthy of love, respect, and happiness, no matter what anyone else did to you. Trust that you will get there. Trust that your story isn't over yet. The best chapters are still ahead of you. And while the past will always be a part of your journey, it doesn't have to define you. You have the power to shape your future, and you can make it a future full of peace, happiness, and new beginnings. I've seen it in myself, and I know you'll see it in you too. Keep moving forward. The life you deserve is waiting for you. The one thing I can't seem to stop thinking about, even months after everything happened with Julia, is how deeply the experience shattered my ability to trust, not just in people, but in myself. I thought I was a good judge of character. I believed I could tell when someone was genuine and when they weren't. But when you've been lied to for so long by someone you loved, it changes how you see the world, how you see your own ability to make decisions. I didn't just lose trust in Julia. I lost trust in the choices I made, the judgment I thought I had. That feeling of betrayal? It doesn't just go away. It stays with you. It follows you into every new situation, every new relationship, every new friend. And it forces you to reckon with a harsh truth. You can't always protect yourself, no matter how hard you try. People will disappoint you. And no matter how much you love someone, no matter how much you trust them, things can fall apart in an instant. At first, I didn't know how to handle that. The idea that everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty could be upended so easily made me question if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. There were nights I couldn't sleep, when my mind wouldn't stop replaying Julia's lies. The countless justifications she made for her affair. The way she looked me in the eye and swore that everything was fine while she was hiding something so devastating. How did I not see it? Why didn't I notice the signs? But eventually, I had to come to terms with something very important. Trust isn't a permanent loss. It can be rebuilt, not just in others, but in yourself as well. And it's a process, one that takes time, patience, and a willingness to be vulnerable again. I realized that in order to move forward, I had to first stop seeing every situation through the lens of what Julia had done to me. If I kept holding on to the idea that everyone would eventually betray me, I was going to live a life filled with isolation, fear, and bitterness. I didn't want that for myself. I've slowly started learning to trust again, but it hasn't been easy. It's like a muscle you haven't used in years. You can't just jump back in and expect it to be as strong as it was before. It's fragile, but it's there, and the more I work on it, the stronger it gets. It started with small things, trusting that a friend would show up when they said they would, trusting that people at work would follow through on promises they made. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments when doubt crept in, but the more I practiced it, the more natural it became to extend trust again. I also realized that rebuilding trust with myself was just as important. Before the affair, I had put so much of my self-worth in Julia and in our relationship. I had invested so much time, energy, and emotion into making sure everything was perfect that I lost sight of my own needs and desires. When everything blew up, I realized that I had failed to trust my instincts. I ignored the small signs that something wasn't right because I didn't want to face the possibility of losing everything. But I've learned now that trusting myself is non-negotiable. I need to listen to my gut, honor my own feelings, and never second-guess myself again. The idea of love feels different now, too. At first, I was terrified of ever loving again. How could I open myself up to someone else after Julia's betrayal? But slowly, I've come to realize that love isn't about perfection. It isn't about never making mistakes or never feeling hurt. It's about being open and honest, communicating openly, and most importantly, trusting that your love can stand the test of time and challenges. For the first time in a long time, I'm learning to embrace the idea that love can be beautiful and trustworthy, but it requires work. Real love isn't about just the good times. It's about navigating the tough times together, being there for each other even when things aren't easy, and showing up with integrity. I don't think I would have understood that before everything happened with Julia. The betrayal was a painful lesson, but it's one that's taught me that love isn't something that should ever be taken for granted. In the time since I've started healing, I've also come to appreciate the strength that comes with vulnerability. Before the affair, I had always kept my guard up, keeping my emotions in check and not allowing anyone to see how deeply I cared. But now, I understand that vulnerability is not a weakness. It's actually a powerful thing. It's the courage to show up as your true self, without fear of rejection or judgment. It's the willingness to trust even when you've been hurt before. And though it scares me sometimes, I know that embracing vulnerability is essential to living a life that's open, honest, and full of love. There are still days when the wounds feel fresh. There are still moments when I wonder how Julia could have done what she did, and the anger and hurt flood back in. But I don't let those moments define me anymore. I acknowledge them, and then I let them go. I don't need to carry that pain forever. I am allowed to heal, and I know now that I am capable of more than I thought. I've rebuilt my life from the ground up, and I've found strength in places I didn't even know existed. Moving forward from betrayal isn't easy, but it's possible. And it's worth it. You will find yourself again. And when you do, you'll realize that even after the worst kind of heartbreak, you can rebuild, grow, and thrive. If there's one thing I would say to someone going through a similar situation, it's this: don't rush your healing. Take your time. Feel the pain. Feel the anger. But know that in time, those feelings won't define you. You will emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. The trust you lost? It can be rebuilt. The love you thought you would never feel again? It will come when the time is right. And most importantly, you will learn to trust yourself again. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. It's hard to believe that it's been a year since everything fell apart with Julia. Looking back, it feels like I've lived a lifetime in the past 12 months. The pain, the confusion, the nights spent alone wondering how everything went so wrong. It's all part of my story now. But I'm not defined by that pain anymore. I'm not stuck in the past, reliving the betrayal over and over. I've learned to let go, to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine, because I deserve peace, and I refuse to let anyone, especially someone who no longer has a place in my life, take that away from me. As I sit here now, reflecting on the journey I've been through, I realize that there's so much more to life than I ever imagined. For a long time, I was stuck in the belief that everything had to be perfect, that I had to have the perfect relationship, the perfect partner, the perfect future. I was so focused on trying to make things work with someone who didn't share the same values or commitment that I neglected the most important relationship of all, the one I have with myself. But that's all changed. I've spent the last year rediscovering who I am, learning to love myself again, and finding the courage to trust in the future. I'm no longer afraid of the unknown. In fact, I've embraced it. I've learned that life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes even painful. But that's where the beauty lies, because it's in those moments that we learn, grow, and truly begin to understand what we're capable of. I've reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and have learned to enjoy my own company in ways I never thought possible. I've traveled, explored new hobbies, and even found myself laughing again, the kind of laugh that comes from deep within, not just a forced chuckle to mask the pain. It's been a journey of rediscovery, and it's shown me just how resilient I am. And yes, I've started dating again. Slowly, cautiously, but I'm no longer scared of what might happen. I've learned to trust myself, to listen to my instincts, and to recognize when something feels right and when it doesn't. I'm no longer looking for someone to fill a void. I'm looking for someone who adds to my life, who shares my values, and who treats me with the respect and love I deserve. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm taking it one step at a time, trusting that the right person will come along when the time is right. There are still moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes, when I'm caught in a quiet moment, I wonder if I'll ever truly be able to trust again. But I remind myself that trust is a choice, and I'm choosing to believe in the good in people. I'm choosing to believe that I'm worthy of love and respect, and that I can trust my judgment moving forward. The journey has been long, and at times incredibly difficult, but I'm proud of where I am now. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I've grown stronger, more self-assured, and more aware of the life I want to create for myself. The betrayal hurt, but it didn't break me. If anything, it taught me to value myself more, to understand my worth, and to never settle for less than I deserve. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that life is unpredictable. People change, circumstances change, and relationships sometimes fall apart. But even in the worst of times, there is always an opportunity for growth. Even in the darkness, there's a chance to find your way back into the light. You're not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by how you respond, how you choose to heal, and how you move forward. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, whether it's betrayal, heartbreak, or loss, please know that you are not alone. The road to healing is long, but you will get there. It's okay to feel angry, sad, confused, or lost. But don't stay in those emotions forever. Don't let them control you. Take time to heal, but never forget that you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. You deserve to have a future that's filled with peace and fulfillment. As for me, I'm looking forward to what comes next. I'm no longer living in the shadow of the past. I'm not waiting for someone else to complete me. I've learned that I am whole on my own, and that the future is full of endless possibilities. I don't know exactly where this journey will take me, but I'm ready to face it head-on, with hope in my heart and the confidence that no matter what happens, I can handle it. So here's to new beginnings, to growth, to healing, and to the future. It's bright, and it's waiting.